Hello, and welcome to Portal to the Next Stage. I wanted to create an episode where we pull together some highlights of different voices that I've been engaging with in conversations over the last several months. And some of those conversations have been featuring women that are tech entrepreneurs, women who are creating ecosystems to show new artistic work that features emerging technologies, and women who are working with their hands and their imagination to create new worlds for us, to create art that elevates our daily human existence. And in those conversations, we have been discussing AI, artificial intelligence. And I think that this is particularly an important topic to discuss with women, especially because of the gender biases that are embedded into the data that AI pulls from. And of course, there are many biases that AI is pulling in. So as both an artist and an early tech adopter, I have really mixed feelings about AI. I'm curious, but I also want to be aware of these biases and have thoughtful conversations about these things. And I just wanted to share some highlights with you from some of these conversations. So to paraphrase a futuristic Hamlet, one might say, to AI or not to AI, that is the question.
Trends. Where do you think things are going?
So in terms of trends, I think obviously AI is making headlines everywhere, and it's going to have a huge effect on all of the screen-based industries and our whole life. But I think it's about the convergence of all these technologies I mentioned before, that they've had their hype cycles, but I actually think it's about them all coming together. So AI can be incredibly useful for us in spatial environments because it's incredibly expensive and it takes a long while to build our projects. So I can see there's great possibilities. For example, things like Gaussian splatting.
Amazing.
Yes. And I don't know enough about it, but that's incredible. We're looking at all these technologies that come together, that will help artists create things. But also there's the flip side where we're seeing loads of artists and people who are suffering from what's happening, and also on a societal level. I'm very concerned about a lot of these technologies we work in I'm incredibly conflicted about them. So I think it's really important to be in them, and for artists and thinkers and social commentators to really adopt what's happening and to challenge them, and to be able to really think carefully about how they're designed and what you do with them. So that's why I came into all of this, actually. In fact, that's probably the reason why I set up Power to the Pixel, because I wanted to challenge myself. I thought it was really important to understand what was happening and not to go, oh my God, I don't want to be involved in this, because we know it's going to happen. So you have to be responsible and be involved. So where are the trends going? I think I'm kind of worried about a lot of what's happening as well. I was listening to one of my favourite podcasts last night, Your Undivided Attention, by Tristram Harris and Azra Raskin, and it had Esther Perel.
I love her. Yeah.
He's so amazing, the relationships psychologist, for those who don't know, talking about AI and virtual relationships and artificial intimacy. And it was a really brilliant podcast because she was talking about how our relationships have been so affected, and technology companies do not talk about relationships. We talk about the environment, we talk about the economy, we don't talk about relationships, and in a way that's key to who we are
as
and how
humans,
and how we affect the world and each other. And I thought it was such a important thing to bring up, and something I feel personally. So when we're talking about trends, I'm going to talk more about my hope for trends. Is I hope that we have more responsible design when it comes to technology, and how these companies who are creating these incredibly powerful tools think about design and bring other people in and other voices to comment on these things, because it's super important. Because at the moment, the idea of these artificial relationships and these artificial worlds that have been created are not great, a lot of them, and they're having a real effect on our psyches and who we are as human beings, when I think what's really important is using them to rethink about who we are in the world and how we are together, and what it feels like to be in different environments or spaces.
I think it's kind of funny. People say sometimes, how have you ended up in these film festivals with this sort of live performance work? But it goes back to the same question I feel, which is, how has VR even ended up in film festivals? And I would love to know what you think.
Yeah. It is extraordinary, and sometimes I think it's a screen-based media, and I just start thinking in terms of storytelling, because there's a lot of really powerful storytelling that happens in virtual reality. Maybe that is the relationship, but also I have a kind of theory in terms of films. The more I was looking at the films, the more I started seeing filmmakers who are trying so hard to jump out of the screen. When you think about people trying to make louder and more immersive films, it's like the sound gets louder, people are shooting in completely different ways, they're trying to put you in the shoes of a character, and in a way I feel that it's something that filmmakers have been trying to do for ages but didn't quite know how to do it. So there's a kind of a appeal, but at the same point there's so much work that is so far away from cinema, with so much of what happens in spatial environments is so far away from cinema. When you give a participant or an audience member agency and you embody them in a space, which is essentially what we're interested in. So it is a very, very interesting point. And sometimes I think it's really difficult that, they are in film festivals, because it's such a different medium and it's such a different industry. It'd be wonderful one day to have a biennale of one's own.
We can wish. We expect that we will be potentially moving our bodies through this space, or we will be putting strapping devices onto our body and connecting with the tech and feeling the tech, and hopefully a lot more with haptics to come. As I've also been doing more work with different artists, the Kinetic Light team that's been working a lot with accessibility and also just finding ways to open the content to more people. And I think haptics really helps. It's a very interesting form and technology to start to play with for storytelling. So you have these different types of challenging productions over the years. You somehow we magically pulled Love Seat together. That was a feat that was that was completely between building and production, all in 6 weeks. The show was written by Mac Rogers in 3 days. We cast actors and taught them how to perform fully, to be comfortable performing for an hour in VR headset, which is a task, and also comfortable with their body then wearing that headset, and not just sort of in the privacy of a private environment or behind a curtain. For me, it was really about exposing the guests to the audience, finding the right partners. HP got involved to help us get equipment there. I've never shipped equipment on giant pallets before to an island. That was all new. And then building a theater there, which was magical. It was really magical. I thought that it also felt to me like a birthing moment. Even though we'd been doing this type of work for years, it felt like an audience was finally introduced to what was possible with social VR in a way that I don't know that social VR had been on a stage. And I'm grateful to Philip Rosedale and his team at High Fidelity for keeping things stable for us, because their platform was changing at that time and they let us keep our world so we could keep performing, which was also really special. Then, of course, as social VR started to change and shift, just as we were heading into the pandemic, who knew? We were experimenting with other platforms, we needed to find a new home for our work. And this is where we came into VR chat. Do you remember when I took you and Michelle into VR chat?
How can I forget? Because I remember, of course, we were all locked down and it was 2020. I remember really well when you took me, because I'd already been into VR chat because Michelle had decided with the college they were going to take it into VR chat, which was completely insane for a development program. But it was they built a space with to do that with a developer, and then you told me you'd been working in VR chat and that you could show me some really, because I was like, well, how do you get into worlds? How do you see exciting worlds? And you took me to places.
We did world hopping together.
You took me on the first world hop, actually, Kira. That's right.
I know. I thought, I'm doing it again with Liz and Michelle. I'm going to pitch this wild idea and we're going to go into this other platform and now we're going to hop through worlds and see another adventure. And, how does this feel? Because mentally, it almost seems impossible that you're going to like meet us here. We'll join in this world, and then we're going to jump through other worlds together. Like we're jumping through these portals.
Absolutely. And also, I remember you taking me to an avatar gallery for the first time.
Yes.
So that's where you are able to try on a different persona that can be anything between animal, vegetable, or mineral, or everything in between, and alien, I forget, extraterrestrial.
Yes.
Very important. And yeah, that was my first world hop. But then it moved so fast because we thought, what are we going to do for the festival? I mean, Venice was very lucky because actually the film festival took place every year because it was in September. And the lockdowns often ended in the summer. But for us, we couldn't have the island and the equipment and everything. It was so difficult
And
these
people
years.
traveling in from other countries.
Absolutely. So we went fully virtual and we built our Venice virtual world. And it was amazing. And so it was the first year we did all our Q&As, and we had your incredible project that then you moved forward again with an incredible innovation, because that was our first VR social world apart from Loveseat that we had that we showed, and it Finding Pandora, and it was really incredible.
I do think that it's tantalizing to say things like AI has the potential to help us avoid task-based work that is a hindrance to us being able to focus. And do the more meaningful stuff, or it's going to give us more time back in our day. I feel like I'm in it, around it all the time right now, working with major corporations who are trying to manage the human change management and the learning and all these other things that have to go with it to actually make it effective, leaving aside all the privacy and security and all that other stuff. And I just don't see it. I don't see it. I think it's a myth. And that's not to say that we can't get there, but to imagine it's going to be painless or swift, or that it's going to treat all people equal is it's an illusion.
We already know it's not treating people
really
equally,
not, yeah.
And it has a long way to go.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's so that's a piece of it. But I'm curious how you feel as a maker, because I also am married to a novelist. So many of our friends are artists. I mean, the musicians. My husband likes to say that writing is thinking, and it's true. The minute you shortcut the pain of that process for any child, they're not learning how to think. So people who don't live a creative process daily tend to really discount, why is it painful? Why does it take a long time?
Right.
Why is there a process? Why do you get totally mentally blocked and then have to go for a walk? I mean, it is for a reason. That is part of the human lived experience.
It's part of the process, definitely.
Yes. And also, what about the collaborative piece? I mean, look at what you do. You guys are building with each other's minds. I mean, that's just...
And we've been building in VR. And in fact, during the pandemic, I almost think it brought our team closer.
Interesting.
Because we were working with each other in virtual space. And we were designing these worlds. This is where we built our show, Finding Pandora X.
Yeah.
And we were able to meet more regularly in virtual space than we had before, and really look at the perspective of the world.
Yeah.
Or rather, look at the world from different perspectives. So I remember a very significant moment for me was meeting with one of my lead developers and flying up to this cloud that we'd built and looking down on the world and going, we need to recenter things, and we need more I could see the world better from being inside the experience, but having that real-time connection with him in virtual space. It's process.
It's process. I was just going to say.
There's no way we could have shortcut that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly, what I have found. And maybe it's because we make in media that are where you can't have everything that you're looking for all the time, right? Or that's complex or new. But so often those creative insights come in those moments of problem solving, right? And again, if you just make that part of it go faster, I don't know what you've gained. So also, I have a real issue with people's work not being respected, and the IP of their work not being respected.
Certainly. Yes, for so many artists. That is, and one of the things that I would like to see happen is
some way to understand what was made with AI versus what isn't?
I mean, people are obviously talking about labeling all of those things, but I think it's still really a slippery slope, because the minute that you have style transfer I mean, yeah, I don't know what to say. I'm skeptical.
It needs a lot of design help.
Yes.
And I think it needs the right minds in the room that are thinking about all of these aspects and what it's going to take for us to get there, because it's moving at such a clip right now. And I don't know that enough guardrails are being put in place.
I don't think so. I mean, and I think that we all could probably look at the ebbs and flows of the metaverse and immersive. And I certainly, as someone who was standing very close to some large tech companies during those times, not inside them, but as an adjacency, would argue that they didn't do that either. I mean, I think some of these opportunities or tools fell by the wayside because there was not a thoughtfulness from a design standpoint.
Mm-hmm. It's just a rush to the immediacy. So does that then parallel back to the focus on a day, 8-hour day in the office, do as much as you can, power through, don't take a break, just don't worry about the design or the thoughtfulness, just keep going?
I think it gets back to I think it's similar. I mean, to me, with the immersive stuff, it was always the race to the hardware, right? Mm-hmm. But without the thinking through, frequently designing the interactive capabilities of the hardware due to the limitations of the hardware, not to what humans would want to do with it, if that makes sense.
Certainly.
I've never understood, and I think that so much of the content that we see in immersive, that's still totally the case. I mean, it's like, make it this way, have the avatar look this way. I mean, it's all accommodating the capabilities of the tech today, not what they should be, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think my feeling about AI is that we're already seeing a similar path. Find the use cases that will fit what it's capable of today, which is way less than
as opposed to here are the types of experiences we want to design.
Yeah.
Here's how we know it can be impactful on human beings. Let's make the tech for that purpose.
Yeah. Right. Or let's go talk to the people who actually know that use case or live that I mean, it's again, technologists tend to be infamous for having too much hubris.
I want to talk about, since so many people all over the world do have a daily workday. And so I'm curious about what role these micro breaks and the breakthroughs have in maintaining focus and productivity. What have you seen from that?
So we see from a quantitative standpoint in our user base, stuff that indicates that people are reaching for it during the places in the day where you would normally be dipping from like a metabolism standpoint. And so there's a reason that people used to take siestas at 2:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon. It's also when we're frequently, as coffee drinkers, are going for a second coffee, et cetera.
It's related to our circadian rhythm, isn't it as well, right? And we're like all a little out of sync quite often with our circadian rhythm.
Yes, exactly right. And so by way of example, we see that it's a tool that people are reaching for in that moment. We also see, and so as an energy management tool during the flow of the day. And I think that reminder that time management is all well and good, but I mean, a lot of the onus on us as individual contributors is how are we able to manage our emotions during the day? So employees use their mood as a resource during the day, which seems counterintuitive, but put yourself in the shoes of a call center worker or a nurse or any person on the front line interacting with strangers, trying to help them through the flow of their day, how you feel about how that last call went, about what's going on for you at home, about what you're doing that evening. I mean, all of those things have a very concrete impact on your ability to show up for the next moment. And so people using it to tune their moods in relation to those kinds of flows. I mean, I get emails from people saying, I did confident today before my big presentation, and it gave them what they needed to stand in their own strength, their body, and show up and do the next thing. So I would argue that those are all significant impacts on productivity. One other thing, I mean, people are searching around the world, Googling, how do they keep focus during the workplace? And I think that there's, it comes along with the technology conversation we were just having, but we know that being able to maintain attention, being able to do deep work versus getting distracted, we all know, when are those windows for ourselves personally? Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? What does it take for you to really be able to hone your focus? And hearing from people that break through is a tool that they're using in that moment is incredibly satisfying to hear. It's the best when it comes from, an engineer at SAP who starts the sentence by saying, I started using Breakthrough so my neck wouldn't hurt at the end of the day. And now I found myself using it because it keeps the code from swimming on my computer in the afternoon. And so I think there's that thing about you have to give people a way in that's the most hitting their biggest need, but then hopefully you're delivering an added kind of value along the way. But one of the things that I've learned that's fascinating as you think about a quantification like productivity is we have no good way to measure it.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
How does it even get measured?
Well, again, because we talked to a lot of academics who study these things, and apparently there was one point in time where Microsoft used to measure productivity by number of lines of code written. At which point there's a myth, but maybe it's true, that someone literally shipped all of the code for Flight Simulator inside Excel. At which point Microsoft realized perhaps we shouldn't be measuring it that way, because isn't one elegant line better than 8,000 that were unneeded?
That don't actually get you anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's the same as a novelist, right? As your partner, maybe just writing, go ahead and write 100 pages, but if you write 10 meaningful pages, that's worth so much more.
Right. Or do the Hemingway thing and write the 100 and then get it down to the 10. And the 10 are going to be what they are because you're scaffolded on top of all of the other work that you did. So it's, but let's also be clear, there are people around the world whose work is literally being measured down to the minute, and they're being counted in every single way. And I think I just sort of willfully ignored that information before I was running this company. And now it's in my face and it's just so appalling. I wouldn't put that life on anyone. And I think the thing is too, that we have to remember that when we're in those kinds of loops where we're being so micromanaged and so measured, it's hard to even take a breath to realize what's going on. You're just on
You're just in a loop.
Wheel.
Is it possible to get something like Breakthrough into some of those factories to change the lives of those people?
We are, and I get emails back that just literally where people say, this is changing my life. And I mean, I'm not taking like, this is changing my life. But when someone says to me that I'm in a windowless space, I used to dance when I was young, I haven't moved since, and now my balance is getting better again. I'm like, okay. I mean, one of the lovely things for Breakthrough is a lot of people who think they're in the well-being space could care less about the person living that life. And so for us, we have a deep desire to design in a way that's very democratic, very accessible, and that can reach into those places where, some of the other well-being initiatives might not be looking.
Do you have a dream of places you would like to see it enter?
I just can't get over all the weird places we've landed, to be frank. I mean, we're in over 45,000 organizations, and every now and then I'll just be like, oh, I wonder if Amtrak, or what about Gucci, or what about, the Detroit Zoo. I'm like, okay, the Detroit Zoo. I mean, that made me happy. I have a desperate desire to see a zookeeper doing Breakthrough in the context of some of those animals. So
yes, I would love to see if the animals want to mirror the zookeepers as well, because probably there's a shared movement there.
People, back to children, and we were talking about this earlier, but I also have interviewed so many professional athletes, and people's envisioning of movement and embodiment of movement. And Kobe Bryant was famous for that, right? It's people dream themselves into the movement vocabulary. Yes, of animals. Yes, of other athletes. Yes, of dancers, et cetera. And that's a really interesting thing.
Performers use it all the time. Yeah. Yes. You look at what was Margot Robbie talking about with her portrayal of Barbie, and she tapped into some animal components.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, again, back to what we're built to do. That's something we're built to do. We're built to mirror a movement that we see in the world. But as for where we want to land that we haven't, I mean, I just want to be everywhere.
You had like 3 wish list places. Where would they be?
We've ended up seeing use in the Red Cross in Kiev. I mean, it's like we've showed up in places where, whoever's grabbing for it really needs that in that moment. And you're just so grateful. So we love some of the corporations we're collaborating with, like Kaiser, for example. I mean, that to me is a win because they're going to give us runway and space, and they have the desire to see this idea innovate. And so when I think about where do I wish for those companies that can enable the product getting better for everyone else.
Absolutely. A place where it can continue to innovate and evolve.
Exactly.
Okay, there's one topic that we have to talk about. Artificial intelligence, AI. How do you feel about it? Does it make you excited? Does it make you nervous? Neither of those things. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's interesting because you're a producer, so you're the one making the decisions about whether or not you're going to use it. How do you feel?
I like it and I don't like it. Again, I think it's a tool. And I think we have to look at a tool. I like to give this metaphor of a knife. You can butter toast with a knife, or you can kill someone with a knife. It's a choice of how we use it. So I think it's going to be a part of our reality. It's not going away. We can't run away from it. I think we need to learn how to use it. We have to learn how to use it ethically. We have to be aware of when it's being used in a process and make that more publicly understandable. Because I think the infiltration of imagery that's created with it, that is being generated by a human that is prompting it. So there is a human input, but then the output obviously is artificial. And I think understanding what has been properly human made with a lot of human effort, at the same time, it can make some processes more efficient. But we use it. It hasn't replaced a single role on any of our productions. If we're using it in an art stage, it's to do some concepting, but the concepts are still coming from here. And in here, they didn't come from AI, and they were with me for years. And the way of which I will create that production, AI will be of little help to get that done. But is there a part in the conceptual phase and the development phase that it can help us? Possibly. But I don't want to use it to write the dialogue. That's what you're for, the human. And I think that the human creative and I think process is also very important for a creative process.
Yes, it's an interesting, the way you're talking about it is interesting. It's like, are we going to art and entertainment for craft, like to see someone's craft, or are we going for their subjectivity? And at times AI can be used to let someone's subjectivity be communicated in a more easy way. I've never thought about it like that. I'm here to see how other humans feel about humanity and express themselves. And so I'm not going to art like a thing that is just for me. I'm going to art to be like, what do we think is funny? What do we think being a human or being on this planet is for? And so for me, I'm thinking specifically about writing, like, I'm not that interested in what an AI has to do. I have thought, this is like I know this much about Marx, but I'm going to talk about him. Like, he talks about capitalism creating the means for production. And then we can seize those means for production and then chill, basically. And so it's like, if we were to create the commerce shows, the shows that like we just need product or create it, and we're just like, oh yeah, AI makes that now. No one wants to write that, whatever. And then we go off and make art. Everybody else, all the writers are free to be like, what's in here? What do I want to do? That could be beautiful if everyone wasn't so worried about surviving. Like, there is a world where AI is coming out and we're all like, do we work 25 hours a week now collectively? Is that possible now? And so that's not happening. I realize that's not what we're in right now, but I do think like, all we have to do is seize the means of production. But anyway, for me, it's just like, I don't go to creative work there's a interest in connecting with who's on the other side, even if it's impersonal. That to me, it's a bummer with AI. And also it's here. I've not worked, I've known people to like sort of like, sometimes I'll get a round of edits or a pitch that I can tell is AI generated. Like I think,
It's not a part of your creative process right now.
No. Because I also love writing. Like the craft of, I love doing it. I love thinking with the page. It's not like I think of a thing and I'm like, oh, that's the idea. The physical act of writing and being with the page and getting ideas from it and iterating is so deeply hard and pleasurable for me and fulfilling, even if it's not pleasurable, that I'm not that interested.
You don't need the shortcut.
I mean, I need it. I don't want it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it's really important. I find as an artist, creator, director, world builder, that AI cannot help me do the thing that I am best at. I think that thing only comes from process. But can it help me, like you said before, if I put my producer hat on, and I wear that role sometimes too on productions, does it help us enable a certain process to move faster?
Yes.
Sure. And then let's empower the person, the department head, the artist that's doing something with the tool that they need.
Yeah. But I mean, does that mean that another person isn't hired? Probably.
Never. Not in our production. Not in our productions. On other people's productions,
yes,
I'm sure.
But also, can you keep up then too? That's the question of like, if the shortcuts, if they're happening and people can outbid your company now, it's just a tricky world where I see how, it might be really hard to stand that ground if, you've got twice as many people working on your show as another one.
That's true.
So we'll see. I mean, I'm not making those decisions right now. I do wonder how theater might be booming too, because theater is so human interested and like, I know there's been some plays, McNeil came out when that had an AI generated text, but I think in general, theater is interested in very much like, what are we up to as people? And so there's a part of me that's like, oh God, at least I have theater. Because
and poetry, if you study that next
Yeah.
Did you have to seek out courses and training in order to find how to write, how to do a 3-act structure,
yes.
etc.?
I'm still doing that. I come from, like, I'm a creative, like, they say gardener versus architect. Do you know this? Like, so a gardener writer, you just kind of vibe and you see what's up. And an architect plans. And so as I move more into screenwriting too, architecture is very important.
I'm an architect.
Yes.
I think
it's amazing.
Yes.
I'm very much a gardener. Like, I go and I'm like, just kind of write. And I'm like, what is the unconscious saying? And then I develop it consciously. So in terms of structure, I'm always learning structure as a second language because my first is like the sort of, where does the language want to go? But what also really helps is being, a maker, you're learning about the craft from another side, meaning like I'm learning a ton from you as director, being with you as a writer and an actor. And so it's a beautiful thing actually, because every time I'm doing one thing, I'm studying another thing. Like when I'm an actor in a play, I'm memorizing and embodying language. And so I'm like, what other way? I can't think of a better way to apprentice with a playwright than to study their language in a way that's embodied and memorized and performed over and over. So in many ways I came at it and I had to study. And then also I've been producing theater and working, like I've stage managed, I've, done all these things. So I've watched new work get developed over time in these various ways. So I was at once new and also versed in many ways.
I love how you're speaking to the fact, though, that your education can be of an experiential nature. You can learn from being a part of productions. You can learn from engaging in different forums and working with other people. It doesn't have to be an undergraduate degree followed by a master's degree. You don't have to train and train and train for years.
Yes.
You can learn almost within the format itself.
Totally. And I think my barometer, because I teach now, and so when people are, and even I love learning. Actually, I really want to go do a low residency MFA in poetry. I really love like I was just listening to one of my poetry teachers, Robin Cost-Lewis's books on tape when I came here, and I was like, being sort of in a dense atmosphere of thinking and learning is so beautiful. And also it's very expensive and it takes a lot of time and energy. So I think though, with regard to like, do you need more school? It's like, do you have the tools you need to keep learning in practicum? Do you have a skill set that lets you work? And also, do you know what you don't know enough that you can seek it out on your own? And if the answer is yes, then it's like, why not get those skills writing?
By doing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, I love school, so there's always that pull.
Well, you can always go back.
I know.
The point is you can learn by doing. You don't necessarily have to pursue tons of degrees. And I love that you're saying you love learning. And I feel like that is what makes our lives so rich as humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about AI? Have you tried it? Do you use it in your regular process?
I want to like AI. There are parts of AI that I like, but I think I just have a bad taste in my mouth because we were on strike. And a lot of the language around AI is just still so vague. And I still feel like in production, we are still not super protected. Our language is not protected enough for us. And like, we're still trying to figure that out. So it does feel a little tricky to use it, but I know I'm going to have to lean in a little bit, I'm going to have to kind of become less rigid and figure out ways to use it for me that makes me feel like I'm still respecting my craft,
And respecting other artists.
Yeah. And I'm still learning. I will admit I'm still learning how to do that, but I'm open to it. I just think that there is something really special about actually like rendering things yourself. I had to go to school to like perfect drawing, to like do all of these things. And I feel like I don't want people to lose that skill.
Sure.
And become too reliant on AI. I think if there was a way to kind of preserve that craft and then have AI work in ways that can still secure my job, then we're fine.
Well, I like what you were saying about how it's a language. And it's almost like, what are we protecting in the language?
Yeah.
Or what are we asking with the language? And so is it the language of design or the language of process? What do you think it relates to?
It might be both. I think it's more about studios being able to have limited power in that way, not being able to like eliminate illustrators because they're really important to our process.
Sure.
And it is such a valid job, and it is a very hard, it's like we don't want painters to go away, muralists, we don't want them to go away. And so costume illustrators are the same thing to me. Even though they do use AI in some way, they do use technology to help with their craft. I mean, we had to learn, like Illustrator, Photoshop. That was really helpful when I was in school to like kind of like really open up our mind and like broaden the design process. But I think really being super clear and concise with the language is more of a protection for us, above the line and below the line, but mostly below the line, and from studios.
I'm curious,
Yeah.
How much of your process is analog? Do you spend time collaging or making mood boards?
Collaging. Whoa. Yeah. I used to do collaging like a lot. Like for like my own like hippie stuff, I still like collage, but part of my process now is definitely sketching and then doing a lot of mood boards online. Yeah. Or on my computer rather.
So there is an analog physical form
Yes.
as well as a digital form to your process.
Yeah. And the digital form is really important to share that with other like department heads within this production, whatever it is, because you can show them sketches and they would obviously love to see sketches. But when I'm presenting like a deck or a mood board, I want there to be like several images for them to choose from so they can get a really good sense of who the character is, rather than just showing them like a few sketches.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, when you talk about your process and you explain how you're spending hours, hundreds of hours to dig through research to find things, I just wonder is there a shortcut to take, or is that process of time important to the final design?
For me, it's important. It's super important. It helps me like retain all of this information. Like, and then I think I'm a little neurotic. I don't think that's a shock to anybody, like people that know me, but I'm a bit neurotic. So shortcuts to me don't make sense because I'm going to think that I have potentially missed something and then I'm going to fixate on it and I'm still going to do it anyway. I'm still just going to go back and like retrace my steps and do it anyway. So shortcuts are like not a thing for me.
I find in our process that when we're building a virtual world or we're trying to get to the heart of what an experience should be, it takes time.
Yeah.
There are ways we can use technology to help us and support us, but I haven't found that I could just turn my process over to a machine. There's still steps that I have to take literally. For me, part of my process is just going on a walk. I still need to literally process things. There is a mental and emotional process that happens in order to get from point A to point B, in order for me to figure out what the story is that we're trying to tell, what the heart of the creative is, and what that final world output will look like and feel like. I just can't just turn it over to a machine. It takes me working through something.
Yeah.
And part of my process is analog. So I love that you still sketch.
Definitely. And also like sometimes I don't even know what my entire process looks like. So if I don't go down the rabbit hole, like I don't, you know, like I have a loose idea. There's like bullet points, you know, that I know that I need to check off. But other than that, there's just so much room to like find things and find inspiration that like, I don't know. Shortcuts make no sense to me.
It's about discovery.
Definitely. Super exciting, right? It's like a treasure hunt.
Yeah. When you find something that you didn't even know was part of the search.
It's like thrifting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're right. It's like thrifting in a shop.
Yep.
Yeah. You have to go through the pile to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, I don't know. I definitely like the journey.
It's a journey. Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes people see the final output of something and they don't know what it took to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think last week my team had to like present a deck. And I think collectively we spent upwards of like 200 hours on this deck. I woke up Friday morning with a migraine because I'd been staring at this computer for so long, so many days and just so long that like, you know, it just hurts. But then the deck came out beautifully. We like got just an amazing response from it. And it's like, okay, that was all worth it. But had we not done the dive,
Right.
we would have never found her. And especially since a lot of what we were looking for predated photography. So we were trying to find like paintings, like just like actual like descriptions of what these people could be wearing. It's so big. I'm sorry because I can't say it.
It's okay.
But like
under NDA.
Yeah. Unfortunately. But yeah, you know, it's just, I don't know. It's maybe the nerd part of me that's just like really into it.
I think there is a research part of our work that you can't shortchange.
No.
And you have to go on the search to get there. And it's worth it in the end, right? Like it's painful sometimes to get there. But then when you step back and you look at that final deck or that final script or the final designs, you go, I know what it took to get here. And it was worth the journey.
Yeah. It's just overwhelming. You're just like, it's a culmination of so many things, you know, like,
Well, it's emotional, right? When you're making art
Yeah.
and you're creating something that hasn't been created before.
yeah, definitely.
I definitely want to unpack this title because you talk about language and this cover is beautiful too. Like maybe we can zoom in on a close-up there for a moment.
What do you like about the cover or the colors or anything?
I like a lot about it. It's like when I look at it, I feel peace from it. You
talk in the book about the multitudes within us.
Yeah.
And when I look at it, there's something about multitudes shining through. It's like I'm going to pick it up again. It's like there's a rainbow of light, but it's shining back at us. So it feels like it's reflecting our true nature back at us.
Yeah.
And that if we find the light, maybe we can rediscover the multitudes within us.
So I'll describe, and I love the word multitudes. That's in the book too, the phrase by Walt Whitman, we contain multitudes. Like, what does it mean to be a scientist and an artist? Or what does it mean to be in productions like we are and incorporate theater and also understand technology and the backstory of mechanics? So I have a lot of different backgrounds in my life, and I wanted this book to reach out to people, especially leadership in big organizations where they might feel that friction of, hey, I have to implement AI right now. I need to do those things. And I have a background in technology and in programming, and I've been studying AI, but I didn't want to write a book about the robotic future and turning away from tech, or a book about merging two things. One of the first covers was a robot arm meeting a human arm. And that's exciting, but it's also maybe a little bit derivative. It's what we would expect.
Right.
Or a well-being book, there could be something like a flower, something blooming. And that's also wonderful. And it's expected. And I thought, how am I going to surprise and delight people with a cover that's actually speaking about elevating to a new way of thinking and feeling and looking at tech not as the enemy, but technology and human as a potential for thriving without turning away from our rich creativity and humanity. Right now, we're at this moment, and we could get into, AI and some of the trends. They're in,
and we should.
Yeah.
We should talk about them too.
And AI is deeper than a trend. Machine learning has been around for a while. How humans are going to approach and really have ethical considerations. Again, consideration. We need to be aware. And maybe the solution is not as fear-based as some of the language has been in the past. And there was something about that back to love and the measures that I think is important. It's kind of escaping me right now, but when you were saying it, I was thinking, yeah, we don't just measure a commodity of time. I know what it was. It was the part 2 of John Kabat-Zinn's conversation with me. I actually asked him this spring at Wisdom 2.0 at the conference in San Francisco, what about wonder? Because wonder is not a fixed attention on this moment. And he said that's different. That's not perseverating over the past. And that's not ruminating and thinking about the future, but that's dreaming about what could be. And sometimes I don't see a lot of that language. I see language on, well, let's focus. Let's use mindfulness to focus on the present moment. But I don't always have to be washing the dishes when I'm washing the dishes. I can be in reverie. I can be in mind wandering and wondering, as you've seen. And that's also a creative way to dream up new solutions to problems and to exercise a leadership of possibility. So that's also in the book.
That helps too let's jump through a portal into spatial computing and AI. Yeah. Obviously it's promising, it's growing. Does it take us, again, further from well-being or closer towards it?
So we just talked about loneliness, and I think it's a nice segue. I would say it takes us closer to it. And with the layered aspect, what we didn't talk about deeply was a level of ambient co-presence. I think a lot of people who use the term social think about people talking with each other, or people who have loneliness need to combat that by being very outgoing. I'm an ambivert, so I'm both an introvert and an extrovert. I like to be around other people, and I don't necessarily have to directly burst their bubble. I can feel their co-presence with me and feel that level of support. So I've seen that happening in XR environments where people are encouraged to be in co-presence with others, kind of like being in the ritual of a theater and you're looking at a production together. Or, this is again another level of awe where they call it this idea of collective effervescence, where you're sharing in a ritual with other people, but you don't have to be loud. You don't have to perform. You don't have to have likes and dislikes and posts with your own identity. So a lot of the ambient co-presence that I'll talk about in spatial technology and in AI-supported computing really helps people feel that level of connection, where it doesn't change their human experience with other humans. It just lets them know that there are spaces of belonging across these continuums. And that's really precise and beautiful that people are now curious about that and wanting to find out more. What I'm seeing happen is more people curious about things like neurodiversity, how people think and learn and share. And I often forget what I look like because I'm in VR and I'm just super curious, and I might be able to float, or I might be able to populate an object, or have music that represents feelings and then be able to sketch in colors and create shapes. So I think, again, one of my go-tos is yes, and it's awesome that we can be attached to our avatars in certain ways and feel like, oh, I love that outfit, or I love that I got to choose that hairstyle, and have really wild colors, or whatever you feel like. I feel it's a chance to give both permission and also say, hey, this is a space where there's a certain amount of levity. And there's also a gravity. That's another one of the phrases I'll say. People can be very closely emotional with each other and really vulnerable. So that's another reason why I think XR, VR, this extended reality and virtual reality worlds can be liberating in so many ways that offer freedom.
Right. They take us into a space of wonder automatically. I agree with you on this, on virtual reality and embodying an avatar, this spatial dimension, and we could talk later about spatial computing. I do think that they can be very vulnerable spaces. I've met people that I've dated in life through virtual reality. I've had, very, crossing time and space with dear colleagues during the pandemic that were dealing with what was happening in Milan in the heart of a very scary time, and finding a closeness and just being present with each other and almost just reaching out with your hand to kind of touch through virtual space and really feel. It sounds perhaps crazy, but you can really feel the presence of someone else. I do think co-presence is possible in these spaces. And they're also spaces where we can have very serious conversations and problem solve. And I think it's interesting that you've led scientists into some of these spaces. You talk about an experience bringing people to the moon through virtual reality. So you're taking a group, I can only imagine everyone in their home, powering up their devices, transporting themselves. We're going where? We're going to the moon in VR, and then you're guiding them through a meditation and poetry. What was it like? What did you witness when you brought that group of people through that experience?
So there were layers. So first it has to start with trust. So sometimes, because I've led several groups to the moon, I'm thinking, I've led LinkedIn to the moon. I've had experiences with different groups, the State Department, a group of architects and people who were archaeologists in Egypt specifically. We were taking artifacts and working with them in a play space that simulated their real environment. And then for one of those experiences, I said, let's go to the moon. What did it feel like? It felt to me as if sometimes people will be on a Zoom call together and we'll start off on Zoom, and then to peel back the layers, it's a hero's journey. So I want people to drop away from their mechanical brain trying to deconstruct, oh, this fidelity is really good, or it's and
you
it
look very photorealistic.
Yes. Oh, look at this environment. How was this coded in Unity? You want them to, again, ride the ride. There's a beautiful book that I love by Orhan Pamuk. He wrote the book Snow, if you know that book. He has a book called The Naive and Sentimental Novelist. And he basically says when you're in an experience, you can either be naive and just say, whoa, oh my gosh, look at this. Or you can be sentimental and you can say, Caitlin's doing this right now. Or, wow, Kira's having an amazing experience. And then you're almost creating a third person of yourself. I say to people, watch out if you refer to yourself in third person in your own head, because then you might not be in the experience as much as observing yourself in the experience. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when you're in these virtual environments too, and you see your avatar run ahead of yourself, there is a disconnect, but then you get to be embodied again.
The example of starting on Zoom, sometimes people are in two places in their head. So usually I'll prime by having that session where I teach the technique and the technical aspect, so then they can cross over the threshold. A lot of people aren't used to VR, but I don't want it to be a best kept secret. You know, I want the accessibility to be more affordable. I want people to be able to either on their browser or in a headset go into that space. So I do part 2 where we just drop away from Zoom. We're only in that one space. We're not conscious anymore of being between two worlds. And those people that I was with, we knew we were physical humans because we had seen each other on the Zoom call. So we already knew, okay, we're all around the world. We're connecting in this space and time. And then they crossed over into VR, dropped away from the Zoom the second time we met, or third time, fourth time. When we went to the moon, it can give me goosebumps because we were really there. Of course, it was more of a simulation of being on the moon, but people had their spacesuits as avatars. We had this kind of buoyancy to the way we were moving. And I could notice people. I asked them afterwards, were you fully present? And they said, yes. Like my awareness was in that pure moment together on the moon, looking at planet Earth. And you have that experience of the overview effect, like an astronaut, where the boundaries between countries broke down. You know, I didn't impose that meaning on them saying you will have a profound takeaway, but they had it because they were there looking at Earth saying, hey, we're all over the world and we're having this international connection here on the moon, looking at our planet in a different way.
And looking at reality in a different way.
Yeah.
Right? You've just shifted their perspective by putting them in this new environment and giving them this opportunity to look back through eyes of wonder.
Thank you for entering the portal with me. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the next stage of storytelling, like and subscribe so that you can catch all of our episodes. If you enjoyed one of these voices, jump through the portal and engage in their full episode. If you have a vision for one of your own immersive productions, partner with Double I Studios and bring the future of storytelling to life today. May you stay curious, open, and embrace the future. I'll see you at the next act.